What was the worst case of parents pushing their dreams onto their children you have seen? When I was a kid at the chess club, there was another kid there. He started school at 8 AM. Then he sang in a choir. After that it was football. Then chess. After that home to do homework. We usually finished around 9 PM. Having 1.5–2 hours worth of homework wasn't unusual. All his days were something like that. He didn't even get to play himself. His grandma, who only knew how the pieces moved and nothing about strategy, sat there telling him what to do. She didn't even attempt to explain why she thought it was a good move. Just do it. I started getting more and more annoyed at her. I wanted to play with her grandson, not Mrs. Do everything I say without question or explanation. He played a lot better when grandma wasn't there. She acted really offended when I told her to let him play. Shut up for a few moves and then she was at it again. Eventually he quit everything except school. I kept hoping that he'd show up at the chess club without grandma, but I understand why he didn't. I sure know how badly that can turn out. When you narrate everything you want a person to do, it can make them lose desire to do anything. As a coach for Little League softball, my team was 10U at the time. We had this one dad who just insisted that his daughter be a pitcher. She was honestly one of our best infielders, so we played her at second base and she liked that position. She was a decent pitcher but much preferred being at second base, and we had 2 other girls that were better pitchers. Dad wasn't happy about that and I didn't see her next season. I hope he got over it. She liked softball and had a knack for it, but dad was about to ruin it for her by forcing her to pitch. I was waiting for the softball parent story. I played from age 5 to 19 and saw my fair share of totally nuts parents. My dad was a coach and was a great one and a parent. Most of the parent coaches I saw became head coaches of a program so they could ensure their daughter was a star. Not me. I sat on the bench my fair share like everyone else. A friend of mine works in Broadway productions and has seen some monstrous stage moms. When he was working on Mary Poppins, one stage mom would buy a seat and sit there taking notes on her kid's performance to grill him on later. She also dragged the kid to all sorts of acting classes, dance classes, etc. The kid had no social skills and no friends. My friend now works on a show with no kids in the cast. I worked as a technician at a major teen girls pageant one time and it's really depressing. Some of the girls you could tell were into it off stage, but so many of them looked miserable, and some even looked frightened of their parents. My cousins were forced to become doctors. They hated to heck and back, and it's just sad to see them not being able to live their dreams. I went to a selective school so I saw a lot of this. I knew girls who cried because they got 98 out of 100 in digital media and wanted to work in film and television, but their parents only cared about their results in English, math and science. Good news is the girl in my story disregarded her parents and followed her dream. I work in a law office. Had a client who forced his daughter to talk with my boss so that my boss could try and convince her to take law school. The enrollment was in 1 week and she refused to go because she was uninterested in being a lawyer and was content in the college degree that she already has. Good for her. Parents of a 12-year-old boy envisioned him becoming a concert pianist and brought him to me for lessons. He had been taking lessons previously with a different teacher, but it wasn't going anywhere. I asked him what his dreams were, what was of interest to him. It was clear that he liked the piano a lot, but becoming a professional pianist was his parents' vision for his future, not his. His folks kept pushing, forcing him to practice more hours and to stay focused almost entirely on learning new pieces, to the point where at one lesson he broke into tears and said he liked learning music, but couldn't stand the pressure from his parents anymore. At that point I interceded on his behalf and explained that they were driving him away from music rather than drawing him to it. Thankfully, they heeded my advice and stopped lessons until such time as he might decide for himself to resume, which, I'm happy to report, he did. Now, he plays beautifully and very relaxed. I dated a guy in college who told me that, if we got married, we'd have to use an egg donor to have kids because I'm short. You see, if his kids ended up being shorter than 6'3", it would be harder for them to become professional athletes. Being professional athletes was the only acceptable career choice for his future sons. Of course he wouldn't have any daughters. How absurd. That relationship didn't last. I feel bad for his future kids. Jesus God, you dodged a bullet. Dad is forcing us to continue his business even though none of my siblings or I want to. I'm not a natural business person like he is, and I don't want to stay in my hometown any longer than what I have to. This guy I went to middle high school with had a father who wanted his son to be the right answer to JFK. Sort of a Rush Limbaugh type who could win political offices. He spent all of his free time going to NRA shooting competitions, and every activity he had to be the captain or he would quit. Also, on everything political he would have a really whitey response. You know, like, yay, well, my gun has killed less people than Ted Kennedy, or I lasted longer than the French. His dad also held him a year back so he would be bigger and stronger than everyone else in the class, which just made him a douche. He was supposed to go to college and be both the student body president and captain of the shooting team. Instead, he promptly changed to a different college and quit shooting. Interesting fellow, really. I hate Americans who mock the French. They were a massive influence on the Revolutionary War, and were more than likely why the US has their independence. Also, to put the world wars in perspective, they had every major power at the time fighting the biggest wars anyone had ever seen inside their borders, twice. I work at a private preschool teaching 2-3-year-olds. Out of a 24 kid class, 3 of the kids' parents have already chosen what college they want to send their kid to. My kid is 4 and the only thing I want out of him right now is to learn the alphabet, hold a writing utensil the correct way, say his numbers in order, and wipe his butt correctly. I hope he'll get into college, but for now I'm just content with him being a kid. For a little bit I was working as a flight instructor. Let me preface this with flying isn't for everyone. Often the students I had either came from money or their parents were pilots themselves. One particular student of mine just had no business being behind the controls of a plane. He didn't know east from west. He couldn't look out the window and ballpark a distance. On one occasion we were about a minute from a nose-to-nose collision with another small aircraft. I pointed it out to him. He looked at the other plane and kinda did a "this is my life now" sort of thing until I took the controls. Anyways, I couldn't continue giving him lessons because he just didn't want to be there. His goal was to be an officer in the army. We had a sit down talk about me discontinuing his course and he started crying and pouting. Turns out his dad was a pilot and told him if he goes into the army he has to fly helicopters and the private pilot certificate would help him get there. 19 years old and in tears. That day sucked. He quit flying for good after our talk. I think he made it to officer school though. At least there's a happy ending. I used to play on a lot of soccer teams when I was a kid, maybe from 6 years old to about 14 or so, and this kid's dad used to always show up to his games and yell at the ref about calls being made about his kid and crap like that. He yells at his son to run faster and work harder, but when his son fricks up somewhere it's either his son is a failure or the ref is picking on his son. You know the type. Anyways, one day when I was about 13 or 14 this kid showed up with his dad and started stretching with the rest of us, but he looked tired as heck. We asked him what was up but barely got an audible grunt before his dad ran toward him and asked him if he wanted his drink. About 20 minutes after drinking this drink the kid was bouncing all over the place and looked like he was ready to play 20 games. About halfway through the game the kid's dad was yelling and screaming as usual and the kid goes to kick the ball then ends up on the ground. We were all wondering what the heck happened. His dad ran up and started yelling as usual and getting bad, blaming the other kid on the other team for going after the ball at the same time. I mean, the whole point of playing a game is to win, right? He ended up being carried away on a cart from an ambulance and we didn't hear from him for a while. About 3 games later and we see him on the sidelines with a cast on his leg and his dad looking pee with his mom next to his dad and giving him stern looks. Turns out his dad had been giving his kid caffeine pills to boost his energy and making him practice hardcore at home, and in doing this he strained his leg too much to the point of him tearing his ACL due to the increased stress combined with his recklessness of the caffeine. We all felt hella bad for him, but his mom was freaking pee at the dad. Reamed him out hardcore anytime he was about to speak up to the ref and tell him how to do his job. She apparently had no idea what her son was going through, and the dad used to be some huge soccer star and was about to go pro or something. Never saw him much after that. The mom ended up going to the games with him after his leg healed up, but he could never play professionally anymore due to that injury. Last I heard from that kid is he grew up and is going to school for pharmacology or something. So good for him. Used to work with a vet whose parents forced him into vet school after a successful career as an air steward, which he seemed to enjoy. He was sadly one of the worst vets I have ever worked with, and it was clear he had no passion for the job. As well as being sad for him, the animals didn't deserve it either. Oh geez, this is the most depressing one for me so far. My husband's aunt has decided which university her sons are going to go to, and no, they will not have a backup. They are not allowed to apply anywhere else. Her sons are fairly average in high school and now have no other university to apply to except MIT. She really thinks the university will take her kids because she will throw money at them. I have no idea where this money is coming from because they're middle class. I work at an ice cream place, and this one lady came in and was telling her daughter that she had to have the strawberry sorbet, our only non-dairy vegan product. And I asked her, is she lactose intolerant, and the mom said, oh no she isn't, but I am and we have to match. The little child says, but mommy, I don't wanna match, I wanna get bubble gum. This is when it got weird. The lady just started screaming at this poor child. Well, my mom made them have the sorbet, so you can only have these two. The child is crying and the mom is just like, just get us 2 strawberry sorbets please, and she just keeps yelling at her. I cash them out and she is half yelling at her child and half talking to me like nothing is happening. I had butthole parents, so my kids have to have butthole parents too. I totally do not understand this logic. You'd think having butthole parents would make you want to be an extra good parent to your own kids. Grateful for my dad. I straight up told him I just want to be an average guy living in a nice house, 3 or 4 bed with a wife, 1 or 2 kids, a dog, and a stable job. He just said, if that's what you think will make you happy, go for it, and if you can be happy most of the time, then that's the real goal. Currently retraining as a nurse, and my dad's helped me get back to university. We live in the south and football is huge here. My son is teammates with a kid who was held back as an 8th grader. He wasn't held back because of grades, but to give him more time to develop before high school ball. He just transferred to my kid's middle school this year, but my son said that it's pretty obvious the kid doesn't love football. He is good at it because he has been training for years now, but he doesn't really enjoy it. He's also the 5th child in his family and the only boy. Part of me thinks his dad kept having kids until he got the boy he wanted so he could groom him into a football player. Part of me thinks his dad kept having kids until he got the boy he wanted so he could groom him into a football player. This is exactly what happened. I have a cousin that did this. It's pretty grotesque when one takes a step back and realizes it. My dad has always said I should get into politics because he wanted to be the mayor. I truly pity people who get into politics. It looks absolutely miserable. A recent mayor of my town had 0 political experience, but he had a business and knew almost everyone through it. Popular vote by 70%. It takes connections to become mayor, not political experience. Dude was fairly happy with the job, if that adds anything. Buddy in high school couldn't ever hang out because he had to practice football, which his dad forced him into in the first place. He hated it and wasn't ever any good at the sport. Fast forward about 10 years, same guy was about to be a father to his newborn son. I stopped by his house to see him painting football crap on the walls of his kid's bedroom. The apple didn't fall far from the tree. Friend's mum was the typical pushy type, A student all the way, all set to go study maths while continuing to play in National Orchestra, 6 AM train journey every weekend. Her close friend took her life, so she balked and realized that she had to do what made her happy and told her mum that she wasn't going to study maths. Changed subjects but still went to one of the most prestigious universities in the UK. She was home within 6 months having a breakdown, yet the mum still continued to push her, dragging her back to uni. Eventually she cracked, came home, moved out of her parents and took the rest of the year to take care of herself. She's now in a college studying something she really enjoys and continues to make progress. I had a freshman student tell me to not get mad if her mom angrily emails nonstop this school year. The poor kid loves history and wants to be an archaeologist when he grows up, but his mom wants him to follow the family footsteps and be a lawyer. His mom has already yelled at the counselor for putting him in basic general ed classes and not in government or law classes. I sent the kid home with some archaeology books after he told me his mom makes him read law books before bed. My cousin was really into snowboarding when he was younger, and his rich father went a little overboard and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on the snowboarding lifestyle, going as far as buying a cottage that was next to a ski hill. My cousin went semi-pro and had sponsorships from different snowboard brands and his own team. His father was pushing him to go for an Olympic team, but he finally admitted that he just wanted to continue snowboarding as a casual hobby and couldn't see himself going pro. His father was furious and made claims that his son was ruining his life and making the wrong choice, and that he would never succeed outside of snowboarding. Crazy rich people. I ran into a guy who was a professional snowboarder in the winter and owned a chain of car washes that opened in the summer. He spent half the year in the Midwest managing a business and the other half in Colorado. He seemed to really have his life figured out, supported his dream hobby with a more than successful career for when his dream couldn't support him. There's this documentary on Netflix called Trophy Kids, and it's about child athletes and their parents who pretty much project themselves on their children. The worst one is a father whose son is a running back for his high school team. What starts as a simple argument escalates into a huge fight where the son reveals that he is sick of football and is quitting at the end of the season. The dad doesn't take it well and has a bigger meltdown than his son. Absolutely crazy. I think that kid went back to live with his mother, who then, unfortunately, got cancer. I went to high school with a guy who was, according to people who knew him, very sweet and not at all conceited. He had played baseball and football from a very young age, and his dad was super controlling about how he trained, what he did to further train once he got home, his food, etc. He couldn't even have a girlfriend because it was a distraction from his training, and his dad wanted him to be scouted by big colleges, etc. His dad had been a big shot high school quarterback or something who considered his life ruined when he got his wife pregnant with their oldest son, the one who he was being so hard on. Christmas break of our senior year, the dude snapped and shot his father to death. One boy in our local school had the same type of dad. He went on to the most expensive uni in our state and became a heavily addicted drug addict in the space of 2 months freshman year. That kid, little Hercules, whose father pumped him full of steroids and had him benching 200 pounds at 8 years old. Todd Marinovich. His father legitimately bred him for football, insane diets, no refined sugar, no refined flour, and exercise from almost the day he was born, with the intention of making him a No. 1 draft pick. Of course, Todd had his demons, becoming addicted to H&C, all while bouncing around from the NFL to the CFL to anywhere that would take him. I believe he was most recently arrested earlier this year for possession. Sad story. Considering the extent of his dad's training regime, it's amazing he made it as far as he did. Even as an NFL quarterback, his substance abuse was a far bigger problem than his level of play. I have coached middle school basketball for nearly 10 years. It is crazy how many kids want to play but are not allowed to by their parents because they have to focus all of their after school attention towards one sport or activity. I had a student in tears one year telling me they wanted to play basketball with their friends but couldn't because their parents forced them to play soccer year round. In my opinion, at that age, kids should be exposed to as many extracurricular as possible and see what they enjoy. Just my 2 cents though. Family I used to work with basically ignored their 2 daughters to focus on their son. Dad jokes that he made his wife have 3 kids so because they needed a son. He was a mediocre football player in middle school. No one in his family was very big. The dad sold the family house and they moved into a trailer home so that they could afford these expensive private lessons and camps for the kid. The 2 daughters had to share a room in a trailer. Eventually got involved in sports because they needed to be out of the house. Were on our state champ soccer team. Never a bit of attention. They might as well not have existed. They fed that kid special meals so he was always training and dad coached his every workout. He did end up getting on the JV team, but basically didn't make varsity because he was too small and the dad was too aggressive. It was excruciating to watch. The family had been referred to social services several times because the girls were basically on their own and the dad was so aggressive with the son. The mom eventually had some kind of breakdown. One of the many reasons I hate football and sports for kids specifically. It was in the South, so people were constantly defending this dude. They say the brain damage happens after playing football. This begs to differ. My parents, you can go to any college you want and do anything you want, except it has to be mechanical engineering at one of these 5 colleges. Frick that, I did a business political science double major and make 5x their income. There's this girl I knew from a biolab. Her dad's a doctor. She hates science, but dad's decided she's going to be a doctor, so there she was, struggling and hating life in freshman bio and freshman chem. Poor girl, hope she finds her way. Someone in my A-level, 16-18, chemistry class really did not want to be there. She was extremely intelligent, I think had a learning difficulty, and had full understanding of the material, but had no interest in it at all. Some of the class picked on her because of it and once ended up causing a laboratory accident with her as the victim. She still came to class afterward, though now with glasses. She got permanent eye damage from the accident and the lecturer did not have eye wash in the laboratory, which is well illegal, but she was even more disinterested. Talked to her once when meeting her by chance in the library between classes. Turns out that both her dad and stepmother were in the sciences, biochemist and doctor, and her siblings had moved out, so the parents pushed everything onto her after noticing her very good science grades at GCSE level. Decided her future for her basically, whether she liked it or not. Straight into mathematics, biology and chemistry in A level. Extra tuition classes after college and 12 hours a day on Saturday and Sunday. She knew what she was talking about and had a very good grasp at sciences. She was so good at biology she once taught her class about nerves when the teacher stepped out because the teacher hadn't explained it clearly enough. Her parents wanted her to go on to either getting a degree in biochemistry or in a medical field, but she hated it. However, she loved history and would sneakily research it between classes. Want to know a list of Chinese emperors from the 12th century to the fall of Imperial China? She'll quote them to you in order with all of their reign dates. Want to know about Welsh class churches? She could detail you where several were built and what and they were based around. What were some of the events leading up to the death of Thomas Becket? She could give you several potential reasons why someone would have wanted him dead. You wanted to know history. She was the one to go to. Lost contact with her after passing college, but we came back into contact a couple of years ago. Managed to get away from her dad and stepmother, gained freedom to do what she wanted. She has now a degree from the London-based School of African and Oriental Studies, speaks 4 languages and works in translating historical documents in museums. Sounds like an awesome job. My dad took my then 17-year-old sister to an Air Force recruiter without telling my mom. They're divorced and had been for years. He wanted to be in the military when he was younger but couldn't due to health problems. He started pushing it on us once we hit high school. I have no problem with people joining the military, but trying to get my underage sister to join without consulting my mother was unsettling. Ugh, that's rough. I don't get how parents could do that sort of thing to their kids. My dad was in the Air Force, now retired, and once I got into high school he encouraged me to go into the Air Force to be an aviator or jet pilot. He never forced me though and I always felt that I had other options. My cousin's teammate had a bad away game one day when they were teens. His dad told him to find his own way home. Instead the boy hung himself. Can't imagine what it's like to let down one of those types of parents. The guy must either feel devastated or feels like his son was a failure. Whatever it is, he is disgusting. Friend of mine lives in China. He is an ethnic minority. His parents weren't able to go to university as they were poor and had difficulty getting a job. Racism does that, so they insisted that he did. Not only that he should, but he should go to fulfill both of their dreams as a doctor. He has a medical degree indeed, he went ahead with it, but he hates it. The thought of putting another person's life in his hands terrifies him, and he already has anxiety disorder from how hard his parents and teachers pushed him. He's 28 now though, not under their yoke. He lies to them about being a doctor while he works on what he does love. His passion is tailoring, and in talking to him it shows. He loves it. It keeps him calm. He makes all of his own clothing, and people love what he makes for them. He couldn't be happier now, but the way that his parents forced him to do something that he not only hated but that terrified him so bad he'd have multiple crippling anxiety attacks a day is horrific. Born deaf in my right ear, hearing loss in my left that wasn't really usable by the time of late middle school to high school. My parents chose to mainstream me with the backing of doctor recommendations. who are not education specialists by the way, severely bullied and isolated. My brother would not spend time with me. My parents, with the doctors, decided to give me prednisone, which is a steroid, while I was still in puberty. I turned out to suffer a lot of anger and extreme emotions during that time. I still lost hearing. Then they decided to treat me with Citizen, which is a chemo drug and was used based on the recommendation of a Dr. Roland Ent and Dr. Weinthal, oncology. I had 6 treatments of it for 8 hours each. I was perfectly healthy and this was experimental to try and stop my hearing loss. Been through rehab, seen people self-harm and do fricked up crap. I've been severely depressed and suicidal at times. I lost out socially and emotionally in this world in so many ways because my family wanted me to act as a hearing person, not as a deaf person using sign. That was their dream, their ideal for me. We do not talk much now. When I was in high school, I knew a girl whose mother bribed her into becoming a cheerleader by promising to buy her a car if she made the squad. The mother was apparently a cheerleader at our school, however, many years before, and was dead set on her daughter continuing the tradition. My boyfriend didn't have many ideas about what he wanted to do when he grew up, but his parents groomed him to be a future filmmaker. They put him in all the summer camps for anything that would influence his future as a director, gave him film-related gifts, volunteered him for things that would put him behind a camera or a script, and this hooked one day, and now he's a year from graduating with a BA in journalism and media, and he's going to grad school pretty soon. They grill him over everything and work his butt into the ground at his job, but, judging from home videos of his childhood, he should have majored in theater. There's a guy who brings his son and daughter to our adult drop-in hockey sessions. The kids are like 9 and 10, seemingly have no interest in the game, or much aptitude for it, and each time they go back to the bench, dad is there to give them further instruction. The dad himself doesn't play and knows frick all about hockey. It's sad to see and sucks for us too, but what can we do about it besides hope they don't show up again as they do, I'm sure. If you're going to meticulously dissect everything your children do, at least have the tiniest idea of whatever the frick it is you're talking about. None, thank God, but my nephew-in-law plays Civ 4 almost as good as I do. You know you spent a long time in the comments when you come across an answer like this. The mother had a terrible childhood, so her 2 children have grown up completely sheltered to the point where they can't watch TV, can't read books that aren't approved, can't date until they're over 18, can't get social media accounts, can't sleep over, have to hang out with their abusive grandparents because families need grandparents to be perfect, vigilantly need their innocence to be preserved, and think that the S word is silly. They are 12 and 9 years old, not entirely sure if it counts, but she is definitely living vicariously through them. The social media I understand. My parents didn't let me get anything until high school. They weren't going to care, but a big cyberbullying thing happened at my school right before I got a smartphone, so they didn't let me. The other stuff is insane though. Why are parents so obsessed with their children being successful if you're not happy? Success doesn't mean crap. The point of life is not to make mad bucks or be famous. My mother grew up on a farm sharing a bed with half a dozen siblings raised by a narcissistic mother and an abusively alcoholic father. It's painfully clear to me she equates having money with being happy. She also needs therapy for her obviously undiagnosed anxiety and personality disorders. The marching band parents really like to live vicariously through their children. I'm still not sure why. Bush Jr. becoming president after Bush Sr. He paints. He seems happier now. My parents insisted that going to university was the only way to do anything. So when I was in my senior year of high school, I was asked when I was applying for schools. When I said I wanted to take a year off and just save some money, etc., I was told that was unacceptable and was supervised until I filled out applications. I was accepted to what was honestly a decent school. But since I didn't want to be there, I didn't try. I did nothing for about 3 years of that crap. Until I got the courage to just tell my parents I was sick of school and I was dropping out. They were shocked when I told them. And now I have such a distaste for university, I don't think I'll ever go back and finish my degree. In your scenario, more or less, finished year 2 with a freaking terrible mental breakdown at the end of last semester, going back next fall to a different school in a different program. No, You're not filling out the FAFSA. We can't give the government our information. I should have known something was up. You go to these two near Ivy League schools and I'll help with nothing. You go local public school and I'll pay for everything. Accepted the deal. Sent in my intent. If it's not STEM, I'm not going to pay for it. I graduated in 2.5. You can do it in 3. This after sleeping with women in Asia, including his Chinese teacher, then taking an Asian studies degree. I was hella spoiled. Sure, he definitely cared about us. It was a ridiculous amount of money. I was suicidal, and after one of my hospitalizations, he covered the cost of my other major, far beyond what any of my peers could ever have. However, perhaps it's selfish, but I really wish he would have talked to my sister and I about what we wanted for ourselves. He's still bad mouthing us to each other. He wonders why I worked a dead-end newspaper job or why my sister on a full ride scholarship may take an extra semester in engineering. He may care in that we got an education, but man, I wish he could be more of a friend. You have been visited by the wealth rat. Subscribe in 12 seconds and he will share his wealth with you. Like and subscribe, you magnificent person.